Hello and welcome to this Further Education and Skills webinar for those responsible for governance. I'd like to begin by asking my team to introduce themselves, so let's begin with Andrea.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Andrea Dill-Russell. I'm Senior His Majesty's Inspector working in the Further Education and Skills Policy team.
Thank you. Sarah?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Lonsdale, one of His Majesty's Inspectors and Specialist Advisor.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rebecca Jennings and I'm one of His Majesty's Inspectors, also a Specialist Advisor.
Thank you. Becky?
Hi all, I'm Rebecca Perry-Tomlinson and I'm also a Specialist Advisor in the First Policy team.
Thank you. And Saul?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. So I'm Saul Pope, and I'm also one of His Majesty's Inspectors and a Specialist Advisor in the Policy team.
Thank you very much. So Andrea and I will be presenting today, and our colleagues will be answering your questions as you post them in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. Please feel free to pose questions throughout the webinar, and we'll also have time at the end of the session where we will share some of the most commonly occurring questions and our responses to those questions. And we'll also hopefully have a little time to take any final questions that you pose to us as a team. So thank you, everyone. We're going to come off camera. So this section builds on our 4 published webinars from November 25. We do not wish to repeat the content, so we've shared a link here if you wish to view these later. And the webinars cover each of the 4 provision types that we have in FES. Provision for learners with high needs, education programmes for young people, adults, and apprenticeships. And we will be focusing tonight on the governance elements of the renewed FES toolkit. So during this session, we will cover the themes on this slide. Our focus will be on the renewed framework toolkit and operating guide. And we hope this will help you to have an understanding of these and the changes in the evaluation areas. And we hope that this will help you in your roles in governance. We won't be talking about inspecting the governance aspect in detail, but we do want to help you to understand the changes and how this might link to your oversight aspect of your role. We also want to note at this stage that we understand that governance looks different depending on the sector you are supporting, the provider setting, and your role within this. For example, we know that the governance in a university setting is very different to that in a GFE or a specialist college, an independent training provider, adult community learning, or an employer provider. And we want to thank many of you for sharing your questions in advance of this webinar. So collectively, this is what we want to achieve. Every one of us has a desire to work and to ensure that all learners and apprentices receive a high quality of education and training. And that enables everyone to achieve, belong, and thrive. And this is about raising standards. We will continue to put learners and apprentices first. And like you, we want great outcomes for all, including learners and apprentices who are disadvantaged, those with SEND or high needs, those who are known or previously known to social care, and those who may face other barriers to their learning and or well-being. And that includes those without level 2 English and or mathematics. And if we get it right for the most vulnerable, we get it right for all. And for the first time, inclusion will be a focus on every inspection. So let's look at our new approach. We are putting learners and apprentices first, breaking down barriers by raising standards, especially for the most disadvantaged and vulnerable. We're improving the way we report and the content of inspection findings to parents, carers, employers, learners, and apprentices. Our new approach to inspection improves the look and feel of inspection for education providers and professionals with a more collaborative approach. It maintains our focus on having care and concern for the well-being and workload of the providers that we work with, and it takes context into greater account on inspection. It makes inspection consistent in approach and continues to improve our process for allowing inspections to be challenged. It provides constructive advice to improve based on the conversations we have with leaders. It is different by design. We have further tailored our inspection approach to each provider and provision type. And our inspection approach enables us to continue to celebrate what providers do well, validate their evaluation, and collaboratively decide on what needs to be developed at the next steps. So let's take a look at the summary of changes. A new inspection report card highlights excellence and identifies areas for improvement, including the next steps a provider should take. Our new 5-point grading scale helps to set high expectations while encouraging improvement where it is needed. Our new grades are urgent improvement, needs attention, expected standard, strong standard, and exceptional. And we'll talk a little more about these later. A key change is a renewed focus on inclusion. This evaluation area is designed to help break down barriers to learning and well-being. Inspectors will evaluate whether education providers are providing high-quality support for all learners and apprentices, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, those who have SEND, and those who are known to children's social care. Our toolkit is designed to show providers and inspectors the evaluation areas that we'll focus on and how we will assess and grade providers. Our inspection findings are grounded in a clear understanding of the provider's unique circumstances, and the operation guide helps to set out how leaders and inspectors will reflect on a provider's context and priorities. And our new system for monitoring providers where improvement is needed is designed to offer reassurance to parents and carers. These monitoring inspections will enable providers to improve some or all of the needs attention and urgent improvement grades and have those improvements recognised. And we are currently developing a video designed specifically for employers to provide more information about the renewed inspection framework and our grading. And this video will be published on the Ofsted YouTube channel soon. I'm now going to hand over to Andrea.
Thanks, Denise. So Denise has already mentioned about the fact that we've now got inclusion as one of our areas in inspection. And this is because we will put learners and apprentices first, breaking down barriers by raising standards, especially for the disadvantaged and vulnerable. This is why we've introduced a separate inclusion evaluation area. And inclusion will also be a key theme across other evaluation areas. As part of this evaluation area, our inspections now look at how providers are addressing barriers to learning for all learners and apprentices. We always start with those the government asks providers to focus on, whether through providers' statutory obligations or non-statutory guidance. And that is why we're particularly emphasising those from socio-economically disadvantaged backgrounds, those with SEND and those known or previously known to children's social care. We will also evaluate how well providers ensure that there is high quality support for all learners and apprentices who may face other barriers to their learning and or well-being. Working with the provider to understand the context and being informed by their demographic information and their professional dialogue. I just want to reiterate, context is really key. As part of understanding the barriers most relevant to a provider, inspectors will make use of demographic data to understand providers' cohorts. But crucially, they'll speak with leaders to understand the context in which the provider is working and the particular barriers that cohorts face. As inspectors form their evaluation of the inclusion evaluation area, they'll consider the systems and processes that leaders have put in place to identify the needs of learners at their provision and address and review the support that they receive. So it's important for us to understand that when we consider inclusion in further education and skills, we'll be doing this through the provider level evaluation area and also through the provision type evaluation areas. So it's a theme that runs through. The whole provider evaluation area is about leaders' actions in identifying and assessing needs and in reducing barriers. These actions taken by staff to meet learners and apprentices' needs through the curriculum and their teaching practices sits in the provision type evaluation areas. In the information about inclusion in the toolkit, you will see that there are three main factors that we've identified that contribute most strongly to inclusion. These are prioritising the early and accurate identification and assessment of learners and apprentices' needs, reducing barriers to learners and apprentices' education, training and/or well-being to support their development, and working closely and effectively with learners and apprentices, parents, carers, professionals and staff, ensuring that learners and apprentices' views and aspirations are included in decision-making about their support. There are four key groups identified in the toolkit in relation to inclusion. These are disadvantaged learners and apprentices who face challenges that hinder their educational progress. The term disadvantaged refers to those learners and apprentices who've been eligible for free school meals in the past 6 years, and those from low-income families. The second is learners and apprentices with special educational needs and/or disabilities, SEND, and those in learning programmes that receive high needs funding. This includes learners and apprentices receiving additional support with their learning and those with an education, health and care plan. Thirdly, are learners and apprentices who are known to or have previously been known to social care, such as those who are under the age of 18 in care and care leavers, and those known to youth justice services. And finally, learners and apprentices who face other barriers to their learning and or wellbeing, including those without level 2 English and mathematics. It's really important to understand that it's not an exhaustive list, it's very much based on the context of the provider and how we consider those learners and apprentices that would not be readily identified as having a need, but still have needs in order to access their education. So that can include things like temporary vulnerabilities, such as suffering, bereavement, relationship breakdowns, and temporary medical issues and so on. For governance, those responsible for governance should be aware of the focus on the most disadvantaged. They should know what the strategic approach of the provider is, and they should have some awareness of the outcomes for learners and apprentices who face barriers to learning. So we're just going to take a little bit of a look at the inspection process. So just to remind you, if you've not already listened to some of our other webinars, that the key aspects of the renewed approach, we've moved towards a more supportive, empathetic approach to inspections, in which the starting point will be at expected standard, and an expected standard is a very high bar. We'll further take each provider's context into account, and inspectors will tailor their approach to each VES provider type. We've adopted a more collaborative approach. We've extensively tested our inspection methodology, and you'll know we've been inspecting under Renewed Eve since November. And during the testing period, we revised our approaches to make sure inspections felt like they were a more collaborative process. And we'll be consistent in our approach to inspections and continuing to improve our processes to provide providers to feedback about their inspection experience. I'm going to provide constructive advice to improve based on inspection evidence and conversations with leaders. And we'll do all of this through a values-driven approach to inspections. That is professional, empathetic, respectful and courteous. And the Ofsted Academy has run the largest package of training for Ofsted ever seen, and we've also released a nominee training alongside our other webinars. So just from a governance perspective, you may or may not have picked this up, that we have made some changes around notifications. So the key change in particular is that all providers now get the extended notification of up to 5 to 6 working days. And that's particularly because we had, from the feedback we had from the sector, was to ensure that small providers as well as the larger providers, we ensure that we were reducing the burden on providers during the planning for inspection. So we aligned the notification period, say, to normally 5 to 6 working days. And obviously this also includes monitoring inspections, which I'm not going to cover today. The inspection cycle, I know we had a couple of questions about this. It is published in the inspection information document for further education and skills, where we stated that providers will normally be inspected within a 4-year cycle. So just going to talk a little bit about what happens when we make the notification call. and at the planning stage. So we've said that the notification window has increased from the 2 days to normally 5 to 6 working days for all providers. In the notification call, we will ask provider leaders to identify a nominee, and I've said we've got some training that we've released for that, and an optional shadow nominee. For those providers where we consider the skills evaluation area, there's no longer a need for a skills nominee, as we've already mentioned. A number of planning calls will take place between notification and inspectors arriving on site. And during these calls, the lead inspector will work with the nominee and senior leaders to identify any necessary reasonable adjustments. At the planning call, inspectors will have discussions with leaders about the provider's current strengths, successes and priorities for improvement. This will enable inspectors to celebrate leaders' strengths, validate their priorities for improvement and highlight where further work is needed. We also use this information to consider leaders' understanding of the provider's strengths and areas for development. We will also ask leaders about governance arrangements to identify how governance works at this provider. Denise has already said we know that is slightly different depending on the provider type. If leaders have a self-assessment report, then they may choose to share this with us at planning. However, it is not a requirement to have self-assessment against the renewed toolkit, and I think that's important for us to highlight. But inspectors are particularly interested in what leaders know to be their strengths, their successes and priorities for improvement. The lead inspector will work collaboratively with provider leaders and the nominee to plan a timetable for the inspection that will enable inspectors to gather the evidence that they need to make grading decisions. And this is based on the collaborative and professional discussions that will take place throughout. The structure of planning will vary according to the size and scale of the provider. For example, planning for a large community learning provider with multiple sites and subcontractor partners will look and feel very different to those that take place for a smaller specialist adult learner provider. So I just wanted to make you aware that there are some changes to the names and the focus of daily meetings. On day one, we'll undertake an orientation meeting, previously known as the initial team meeting. There's no longer a provider presentation. The lead inspector reflects back to the inspection team and the nominee the information that senior leaders have shared during the planning stages of the inspection. We also have reflection meetings. These were previously known as the team and kit meetings. And these continue to be an opportunity for the inspection team and leaders to review the evidence and share feedback. They allow the team to share their thinking in an open, professional and transparent manner. They will also provide time for consideration of whether any inspection activity needs to be adapted in light of emerging evidence. These meetings will take place formally at the start and end of each inspection day, but there can be ongoing reflection meetings between the lead inspector and the nominee throughout the inspection. The inspection will conclude with a grading meeting and the nominee and final feedback meeting involving other senior leaders and external bodies as appropriate. So just have a little look at the evaluation and the toolkits. So our toolkits, which I'm sure you're now familiar with, show providers and inspectors the evaluation areas that we'll focus on within them and the standards we will evaluate to inform grading. The inspection toolkit is based on statutory duties and non-statutory guidance, professional standards, research and inspection evidence. It's just really key to understand that the toolkit is not a checklist because it will be different depending on the provider's context. It is used to guide conversations, reflect on evidence, and make sure grades reflect the evidence gathered. It supports a shared understanding and discussion of the strengths of the provider's work, its context, and the areas for further exploration. Inspectors will apply the toolkit evaluation areas, themes, and standards, tailoring evaluation to each provider's context. As we said, nothing in the standards set out in the toolkits should add to a provider's workload, nor do we expect providers to have completed any formal self-evaluation. However, providers may wish to use the toolkit to support continuing improvement, and we expect leaders to share their strengths, successes and priorities with us, as we've already mentioned. The general structure of the toolkit is the same, whatever remit you're working in. Evaluations area summary, explanation of how this is applied in different provider contexts and provision types. explanation of evidence inspectors will consider, and finally grading standards. So if attendance is good, for example, it's not compulsory in early years, so we'll look at how well the settings establish routines. In schools, we'll focus on attendance, and then in post-16 in further education and skills, we look at participation of learners and apprentices. We've carefully reflected an evaluation area to apply to the different sectors in which we inspect. So we know for FES that can look quite different depending on your provider type. So as you will see from here, we've got the whole provision evaluation areas, which are the boxes in the top in blue: leadership and governance, inclusion and safeguarding. And if you are a college, sixth form college or designating institution, there's also the contribution to meeting skills needs. Below that, you'll see the different provision type areas. So these are curriculum, teaching and training, achievement and participation and development. Providers will be graded in each of these 3 evaluation areas for each type of provision they offer. When inspecting each evaluation area, inspectors will collect evidence and begin evaluating the provider against the expected standard criteria. And we already said, because that is a very high bar. So in the toolkit, the judgment about leadership and governance is covered in pages 17 to 24. But this slide in particular is talking about page 17 in the toolkit. So just to outline that each evaluation area starts with what will be considered. This is written to help leaders and inspectors understand what the evaluation area is at a glance and what do we mean by belong. This is where an apprentice or learner feels that they belong and are valued by staff at a provider. A learner and apprentice is thriving when they are kept safe and they are fulfilling their potential. What is important to note is that our grading standards are based on research, inspection evidence, statutory and non-statutory guidance set out by the DfE. When inspectors use the expected standard as the starting point of inspection, they're evaluating whether leaders are meeting those expectations. So this section as well also describes the most significant contributing factors that underpin our approach to evidence gathering and grading. You can expect inspectors will ask you questions to seek to gather evidence for each of the 6 bullets written on this page. So just quickly going to look at the standards in the toolkit. So each evaluation area is graded against the scale: urgent improvement, needs attention, expected standard, which is our starting point, strong standard and exceptional. For safeguarding, there's a binary met or not met grade. The evaluation areas follow with clear grading standards for the proposed grades we expect to see most frequently on inspection. For expected and strong standard, each grade has a set of standards that define the quality expected for each area. These are based where relevant and available on the statutory and non-statutory guidance and professional guidelines that are set by government. When grading, we will start with expected to identify whether all the standards have been met. If all the standards have been met at expected standard, then we will then consider strong standard. And that's where the same applies. So again, all of the standards have to be met for expected standard and strong standard for strong standard to be awarded. The key difference is that we no longer do a best fit model. We are now on a secure fit, and that's because all the standards have to be met. Like we say, expected is a high bar. And just one last slide on the toolkit before I hand back to Denise. So the 2 areas we are expecting to see less frequently are the urgent improvements and the exceptional grade. So as with needs attention, these are indicators that there is something that is needs attention, urgent improvement, or as exceptional. Exceptional is just that. In order to achieve that grade for an evaluation area, all of the expected standard and all of the strong standard have to be met. And the provider needs to be demonstrating that it is working in a transformational way for the learners and apprentices that it's working with. So that's why we expect to see these on a very rare occasion. So I'm going to hand over to Denise now, who's going to do a little bit more around governance.
Thank you, Andrea. We're going to cover again quite a bit in relation to each of the new grading criteria that we're using. So let's have a look in a bit more detail at the expected standards in leadership and governance. And you will hear us say many times, because this is really the biggest shift for us in terms of this renewed framework, expected standards are a high bar, and meeting these standards in an evaluation area means that as a provider, you are doing what you are meant to be doing for your learners and your apprentices. It is the expected level of quality. It's the high bar, and providers will need to demonstrate that you've met all of the relevant statutory and non-statutory guidance and statutory duties. In doing so, you will demonstrate that you are providing a high quality of education and training for learners and apprentices, irrespective of their starting points. We know that expected standard is based on the expectations placed upon you by government, but it also follows logically that if we expect and want great things for learners and apprentices in this country, what is expected must be that high bar, and it cannot represent a minimum standard or be a sign of mediocrity. So if you achieve the expected standard at inspection, you can reflect on a job well done. And this will be typically or generally the case. It will be characteristic of this provision in the evaluation area. Whereas, as Andrea said, for strong, it is a secure fit and it is of high quality and high impact, and inspectors will have found evidence of high quality consistently across the evaluation area. And if you achieve above the expected standard, then you are really flying. The strong standard represents excellent practice. And you may have seen from already published inspection reports that numerous providers have been graded strong standard for aspects of their work. Anything graded exceptional is exactly that. It truly is among the very best nationally and worthy of sharing and using to inspire your peers. Exceptional is the very best practice nationally, and those who achieve it are genuinely standing head and shoulders above others. And crucially, this must be shared with others so we can drive system-wide improvements. And let's pause for a moment on needs attention. Along with expected and strong standards, we anticipate that this grade we will see this grade more frequently than other grades. It's important that this grade is not seen as a fail. It is an indication that there is more work to be done. And when viewed in this way, it becomes an opportunity and a catalyst for improvement. So to be clear, we are expecting, and we expected when we designed this framework, that we would most commonly see expected, strong, and needs attention in terms of the grades when we visit our providers. And the needs attention grade is about catching things before they become bigger problems. And that is the purpose of needs attention, early identification and timely support. And this grade should never come as a surprise, and we shouldn't be shining a light on anything you haven't already identified yourselves or anything you're not already improving. And remember, under our revised monitoring inspection arrangements, we can also more quickly regrade providers if you address the areas that need attention. We can return and recognise that improvement much more promptly than we were under the EIF. So let's just return for a moment to the planning of inspection. At the planning calls, inspectors will have a discussion with leaders about the provider's current strengths, successes, and priorities for improvement. This includes where leaders believe the provider's provision is in terms of our 5-point grading scale for each of the evaluation areas. Inspectors will carry out a learning walk with a focus on leadership to demonstrate how their priorities and actions are being realised. There will also be learning walks with a focus on inclusion, on curriculum teaching and training, and achievement. And in the smallest providers, we will work with you if actually these learning walks do not suit your context and the number of staff you have available on inspection. We will work with you to seek other forms of evidence if this isn't something that's going to work for you. So please feel free to have that conversation with the lead inspector at the planning stage. Inspectors may have meetings with those responsible for governance and/or oversight, and this can also be a phone call if necessary, and is likely to focus on broad strategic oversight. Inspectors will want to have discussions with staff, learners, apprentices, subcontractors, and stakeholders where appropriate, as well as reviewing other evidence such as records of meetings or training. And inspectors will seek to establish the effectiveness of the arrangements that are in place. Our inspectors know that governance isn't just that, governance. It does not automatically mean governors. Not all provider types in further education and skills are required to have a governing body in place, and governance is a broader concept than whether there is a board of governors present. We know that there are different legislative requirements for some providers and different structures to governance depending on the provider type. In any provider, inspectors know that governance is a system that provides a framework for managing organisations. It is about the decision makers who have the authority to act on behalf of the organisation and who are accountable for how the organisation and its people behave and perform. There are a range of different governance structures found in FES, and Ofsted have no preferred style of governing bodies or boards. We seek to establish the effectiveness of the arrangements that are in place, and we need to assure ourselves that these are being followed in each of the provider types. In the expected standard with reference to governance, we know this is a high bar, and we want to ensure that those in a governance capacity ensure that leaders have a clear strategy and hold them to account for following this. We expect governors to ensure resources are well managed. This includes staffing, teaching resources, and facilities. Those in a governance role are responsible for holding leaders to account for their actions whilst being mindful of their well-being. Decisions made by those with oversight and leaders should always be within the best interest of learners, particularly those in vulnerable groups. And this is a key difference in governance in the renewed framework. As governors, board members, trustees, you may want to consider how leaders and managers assure you about how well they meet the new criteria. Does the information reported at governance level clearly identify the progress and achievement of disadvantaged learners or those with SEND and high needs? Is there a clear oversight of the quality of curriculum, teaching and training that all learners and apprentices receive? And do leaders ensure they accurately identify and put in place support that learners and apprentices require? For the expected standard, there will be a need for those in governance to have a generally accurate understanding of the quality of curriculum, teaching and training, including the subcontracted provision. Sometimes we find that those responsible for governance do not have the same level of oversight for the subcontracted provision, and we know that this must be managed with the same rigour as the internal provision. To ensure a secure fit for this standard, we would expect leaders and those in governance to have an understanding of most of the areas for improvement identified, particularly that identified as part of the inspection. If an evaluation area securely meets all of the expected standard criteria, then the next step for inspectors is to consider whether all of the strong standard criteria are also being met. the same secure fit test applies to the strong standard. And so for strong standard to apply, there needs to be significant evidence of high standards and/or high impact. And this may be in the form of high quality work produced by learners and apprentices, and with them feeling highly valued and respected. In the toolkit, the words high and highly feature very often under the strong standard criteria, and consistency is also a key word. Under the expected standard, typical means that it's characteristic or usual in the provision, but consistent means that the same high quality is steadily in place across learners and apprentices' experiences, and it's nearly always in place. For strong standard in relation to governance, we expect a detailed insight into the provider's strengths and areas for improvement. There should be a precise actions underpinned by strategy that drives improvement. And where there are areas for development, leaders have implemented effective actions and the impact on learners and apprentices is sustained over time. So a key principle when it comes to considering if a grade is an evaluation area that needs attention is the bullet points in this column in the toolkit. These are not standards, they are indicators, and they help inspectors and the provider to help understand where the expected standard has not yet been met. As part of our consultation, we listened carefully to inspectors and the sector who said that in the previous EIF, having no criteria for a grade that was previously known as requires improvement was not helpful and led to inconsistency in grading. An evaluation area will be graded needs attention if inspectors find that not all of the expected standards have been met and none of the urgent improvement indicators apply. Inspectors may find that indicators which appear under the needs attention match closely with the evidence they have gathered, but they do not have to match any of these to the evidence. For this grade, it is enough to be able to confirm that not all of the expected standard criteria apply. As the lowest grade in the renewed EIF, urgent improvement relates to very poor provision and/or practice, and it means that inspectors are finding serious or widespread failures. Only one of the indicators listed needs to apply for an evaluation area to be graded as urgent improvement. Such provision and practice are likely to be few and far between, and given this, we expect that urgent improvement grades will be relatively rare. So let's take a look at exceptional leadership and governance. As the name suggests, this is for standout cases of very highly effective provision, and it is likely to be awarded only in exceptional cases. As all of the bullets under exceptional consistently need to apply for an exceptional grade to be awarded in any evaluation area. It would not be enough for there to be a few standout examples of exceptional quality across the provision. There would need to be a widely felt impact on learners and apprentices. And as Andrea mentioned, before even reaching this point, inspectors will have to have already confirmed that the provider securely meets all of the expected and strong standards. And this bar is very high for exceptional, and deliberately so. The provision should be of such a quality that it can be, as the graded standards state, shared externally to support that system-wide improvement. So I hope that's helpful in terms of how we reach each of those grades, particularly under the heading of leadership and governance. So let's have a look at the report cards. We have brought together the most popular preferences from parents, stakeholders, and professionals by combining separate grades, rating scales, and short summaries into our new report cards. The narrative under each grade gives a detailed picture of performance, while the 5-point scale offers the clarity and simplicity to the reader. We also publish data alongside the inspection report card to help illustrate the provider's context and key performance data over time, which of course inspectors will have used as part of the evidence they've collected to inform evaluation grades. Please scan this QR code if you would like to watch our video, which helps to explain the new report cards and the grades to parents. The draft report card is usually sent to a provider within 18 working days, and we ask them to submit factual comments or a complaint about the inspection at this point. And then the final report card is usually published and sent to the provider within 30 working days of the end of an inspection. And as I mentioned earlier, where a provider is graded less than the expected standard in any of the evaluation areas, they will be subject to a monitoring inspection. So let's have a look at when an FE provider can expect their next inspection. So if you received a legacy EIF overall effectiveness judgment of outstanding or good, you will likely be inspected within 4 years of the publication of your most recent full inspection report. If the overall effectiveness judgment requires improvement, a full inspection will be likely within 30 months. And finally, if you've received an overall effectiveness judgment of inadequate, you will have a full inspection typically within 15 months of the publication of your most recent inspection report. We will continue to carry out routine monitoring of providers that are newly merged colleges or have recently required funding to start providing new provision to learners or apprentices. Where there is a newly merged college, a monitoring inspection will take place if at least one of the predecessor colleges has a legacy overall effectiveness grade of requires improvement or inadequate at their most recent inspection. Under the renewed framework, a monitoring inspection will take place if at least one of the predecessor colleges has a needs attention or urgent improvement grade for any evaluation area. We will carry out a monitoring inspection of any newly merged college at a reasonable time following the merger, and the full inspection will take place within 3 years of the merger. Where providers have been successful in securing funding from the Department for Education, Combined Authority, Local Authority, or the DWP, we will undertake a new provider monitoring inspection. The funding bodies alert Ofsted to providers securing funding for the delivery of provision for education programmes for young people, adult learners, including skills boot camps, apprenticeships, or provision specifically designed for learners with high needs. The new provider monitoring inspections will focus on the provision type that the provider has been funded to deliver. Inspectors will evaluate how well the provider is making progress against the themes of leadership and governance, inclusion, curriculum teaching and training, and safeguarding. And these are set out in our FES Monitoring Inspection Operating Guide. The monitoring inspection will continue to take place normally around 18 months of the provider starting delivery, and this will be followed by a full inspection under the renewed framework within 3 years of starting to deliver that funded provision.
Denise, just the last couple of slides from me. So we're going to assess the reforms and how well they're working through a delivery programme evaluation to understand the implementation and the impact of this work. The evaluation plan will include various elements, including an externally commissioned evaluation of the renewed inspection framework. This will be through an independent supplier who will deliver a baseline study in summer and autumn 2025, preliminary in-depth quality of research in spring 2026, and a rolling evaluation survey carried out post-inspection to be continued each year. So it's a longitudinal piece of work. We're also doing a programme of work to measure our consistency. This includes testing consistency through His Majesty's Inspector shadow inspections, desk-based study using vignettes, and through data that informs weekly consistency meetings, and further planned evaluations of the changes such as engagement with parents and carers, providers and inspectors. Just to sort of to note with that, we have been undertaking a number of exit interviews, and this has included FES providers. The next couple of slides are just for you to, if you want to get your phone out and hover over. So this is the information that we've got available around the inspection toolkit, the operating guide, information about inspections, and the monitoring operating guide, all of which we've referred to during this session. And then the final code that you can scan includes a longer document, which is a frequently asked questions information that we've had developed through all of the webinars that we've done. So we're going to stop presenting now and then hopefully hand over to, I know our team have been answering your questions as we've gone along. So Denise.
Thank you. And team, if you could turn your cameras on, please. And thank you. I can see we've had lots of questions, and it's lovely to see some names that we recognise in the questions box. So thank you everyone for posing your questions, and thank you to the team for responding to as many questions as you can. So let's start with Sol. Sol, any commonly occurring questions and our responses to those, please? That might be helpful to everyone that's dialed in today.
Yeah, okay, Denise. Yeah, thank you for that. A lot of the time we haven't had common questions. Maybe there have been questions around consistency, so consistent FES toolkit application and grading nationally across all providers, and important responses to that include the secure fit as well as the nature of the toolkit itself. Context is all important, yes, but that is in consideration of evidence gathering activities that we're going to undertake, for example. And we use that in the light of the toolkit, but ultimately the toolkit is a toolkit, and as you've said there, the important thing in terms of being graded expected standard or above will be the degree of consistency that we find, so that we can be confident of a secure fit. So I think that's one that's come up quite a bit. I'm not sure if anyone else has got any others that have come up that they've responded to.
Thank you. Becky?
Apologies, I was just trying to find the unmute button. Yeah, I was just looking through, as Saul says, there's not a huge amount of themes coming up, but we've certainly, as I say, had a number of individual questions. For example, there was a question about preparation and if the SAR and QUIP will be reviewed prior to an inspection, which, yes, they are available to the lead inspector if they're submitted, but as was said in the presentation, actually we don't expect that, we don't require that. The most important part of the preparation of the discussions with provider leaders about what the areas of strength are, what the priorities for improvement are, but of course we would expect there to be some quality improvement planning in place, but we would never have a preferred style to that. We wouldn't say it must be in this format or that format. The important thing is that those priorities for improvement are identified and actions are being taken, and of course that those strengths are being celebrated, and that we can celebrate those with you as part of the inspection. Again, yeah, just looking through.
I just spotted another one actually that's come up a couple of times, Becky, so while you're looking through, I'll take that one.
Yeah, please do so.
So a few of those attending have asked about governors and governors' role in inspection. So we've got the example of where there might be 20 governors, and would an inspection team expect to see all of those, or would it be specific inspectors? I mean, first of all, to answer a question about are governors involved at all, yes, absolutely. We are still interested in terms of leadership and governance on the oversight of governors and how they support and challenge leaders to make improvements to provision. So yes, governors are, but yeah, I mean, we wouldn't expect or need to see every single governor, as was the case in the past. It's important to speak to, for example, chair of governors or similar, governors with oversight of curriculum, certainly, and safeguarding as well. Ultimately, though, this is something that the lead inspector would talk with the nominee about to determine who are the right governors, the best governors to be involved. And another thing I think to add, we realise governors are very busy with other activities day to day. So it's fine to have meetings remotely. Face-to-face is great, of course, but if it ends up it's best done remotely as a Teams meeting, for example, that's absolutely fine. The important thing is that we're able to have that discussion and to gather the evidence that we need.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Sarah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things around the theme of context, I guess, is we've had a few questions about planning and how we start to take that context into account, and a few comments on if the presentation that the provider used to do at the beginning of the inspection has gone, how do we take into account that context and how do we start planning that? So I think it's just important to remind people that actually starts much earlier now. So in the planning call, there is the opportunity there, as we already said, I think, for leaders to share with us their strengths, their priorities for improvement, and that will give us that kind of understanding of the provision, and then also start to form those discussions around the context of the provider as well, which obviously is a way in which we start that in planning ready for the inspection.
Yeah, thank you. And just to give some context, the reason why we introduced the lead inspector to do that initial presentation at the beginning of the inspection rather than the provider is we're trying to demonstrate to the provider that we've heard you. So we're doing up to 3 planning calls, and we're trying to demonstrate we've heard you. These are the key messages that we've heard. So we're presenting them back to you so that you get the opportunity to say, yes, I can see that you've understood us and who we are and what we do and where we do, or not. And it landed really well when we did the test visits and when we did the pilots. Providers saying, actually, we really like the fact that you were able to demonstrate to us that you understood us, because we heard in the big listen that actually FES inspections were generally managed really well, but they did say that they wanted to make sure, because we had over 400 responses, and something that came across pretty loud and clear was actually sometimes inspectors don't really understand us and our context. So this was a way of us helping to demonstrate that we've heard you and that we're presenting back to you the messages that we've heard. And then, of course, if you think that we haven't, I'm sure you will let us know at that planning stage. Rebecca, anything for you?
Hello. Yes, we've had a couple of points that have come through, particularly around independent training providers and what we expect to see governors doing to hold independent training providers to account. Now, we recognise that there are a range of different governance structures found across FES, and so we don't have a preferred style of governing boards, governing bodies or boards, but what we're trying to do is seek the effectiveness of those arrangements that are in place. So if we look at our expected standards, there will be a need for those in governance to have a generally accurate understanding of the quality of the curriculum, teaching and training, and as already said, around that subcontracted provision.
Yeah, thank you. And Becky, do you want to say something a little bit about data, because there's a number of questions about the use of data on inspection?
Absolutely. Yeah, to say that obviously data is it is a source of evidence for us on an inspection, but I think it's really important to make clear that as part of achievement, data is not the only thing that we look at. Data is part of that grade. So we still look at standards of work. We still look at the progress that learners and apprentices make. We still look at how they achieve in line with their personal goals. And of course, there are many courses in our remit where data doesn't really come into it in the same way because they're not qualification based. You will know that the report card is published with data as part of the report card that is published and validated, but we will still work with leaders and seek evidence of where there's been improvements, and like I say, it's not purely about data. If that were the case, then we wouldn't need to come along and do an inspection in the first place. We're still interested in the quality, but data does form part of that grade for achievement, but it is really, really important to understand that it is not the sole driving factor of the achievement grade.
Thank you. And you'll find we've done over 100 inspections since November, and you'll find that there will be some reports where the data doesn't necessarily reflect the grade that's given. And so we work really hard to tell that story in the report, because sometimes it's quite a while since that data's been updated on behalf of the provider, but what we actually find on inspection is a much more positive picture. So we'll tell that story as part of the report card text. And as Rebecca says, it's only one small aspect of a number of sources that we use to make that final decision about the grade that most suits this provider under the heading of achievement. Thank you.
Just to add to that point as well, Denise, as Becky said, we had a few questions around data regarding disadvantaged learners who ascend, and how would governors use that, or what do they need to look at? And again, as we say, we don't have a preferred style. It wouldn't be for us to say it has to be presented in this format, but certainly we would be interested to know that governors have got that oversight of the different disadvantaged groups, learners with ascend. So it might be that a data tool is a means to get that oversight, you know, in the reporting that governors receive.
Yeah, thank you. And we'd be asking questions such as, what does this data suggest to you? What actions have you given to leaders? How have they explained this? What actions have they taken to address and get a remedial response to areas for development? What impact are they having? How do you know? So we'd be teasing out those questions with you, but always following the toolkit to make sure that what we do is absolutely consistent for all providers. So
yeah, there's a few more questions come in about governance and who should attend governance meetings. So a couple of questions about the governance professional for colleges sitting in on interviews with board members. I think the important, you know, the people that we want to speak to are those who are going to give us the richest evidence when it comes to gathering evidence. That's what the meetings are all about. So that is the key consideration in terms of who specifically attends a governance meeting, I think, and that will be important to discuss. And it is discuss with the lead inspector. If you think that certain individuals on the governance board should be there, that you know they've got a really important role to play in this, then that's absolutely fine, and you can agree that with the lead inspector. And another question just about governance meetings, and you know the meetings that will be requested, are there going to be several different ones? Is it just one meeting with governors? Generally, it's the approach that there will be one main meeting with governors. It might be we have to split these off due to availability, for example. If certain governors are not available at certain times, then we would do that. But as a general rule, yeah, one meeting, but it depends on availability. So hopefully that's useful in helping providers to prepare. And as I said, remote is absolutely fine in terms of attendance of some or all governors.
great. And can we talk a little bit about learning walks? I think governors would like to understand what we mean by that. Who would like to pick that one up?
I'm more than happy to do that, Denise.
Thank you.
So learning walks are they're actually they're a real pleasure for us to do as well. They are an opportunity to celebrate and really celebrate with leaders what they're proud of, what they're doing well. And what we're doing at the moment is we're currently trying to we're doing what we can to organise 3. It's not always possible because again it depends on the size, the scope, and everything else, and the context of the provider. But we look to do one for leadership, where a senior leader within the organisation goes with the lead inspector usually to show them something to do with leadership that they're proud of. You'll have talked to us about that, and then the opportunity to show us that and show us the impact and really celebrate that with the lead inspector. Similarly, we look to do a learning walk around inclusion, where again we want to go and see and celebrate with leaders the great work they're doing around inclusion and a thing that they're particularly proud of. And the third one is around curriculum, teaching, training and achievement. Now, the one thing to say with learning walks is to not think necessarily of learning walks as we used to define them under the CIF. So it doesn't necessarily mean bobbing in and out of lots of lessons. It could mean visiting a variety of learning environments. It depends what the focus of that learning walk is. But importantly, the lead inspector won't tell leaders this is what the learning walk will focus on. We really want to give leaders the opportunity to say to us, this is something we're really proud of, and this is something we want to show you and celebrate with you. And as I say, they're a pleasure for us to do. And we found that yeah, providers do enjoy obviously celebrating what they're doing well.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time. Andrea, final word to you.
So no, I think we've covered most of the the questions that are in the chat. I've been trying to answer a few as we've gone along. There was a question about 14 to 16s, which I've answered. So if it's part-time, it's under the safeguarding aspect. If they're full-time, then we would consider them under education programmes for young people and be graded as part of that. So but I think everything else we've covered. So thank you for people's time. We are now 2 minutes over. So I think somebody's already said they've had to leave for another meeting. So
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for those of you that dialed in. We hope you found this helpful. We did decide to do this webinar based on feedback that we were getting from providers, and they thought it would be helpful if we talk directly to those of you that are responsible for governance arrangements in our wide range of FES providers. So we do hope that it's been helpful, and a special thank you to the policy team for taking part and answering all of those questions this evening. Thank you.